Good morning. Welcome to Live with Chatty Kathy on this Wednesday morning. Today I decided that I wanted to talk about Minky. And it has a lot of different names. Minky is the term that everybody seems to be the most familiar with. Minky was trademarked actually by a company named Benartex Fabrics. They are the first company that I'm aware of that produced this fabric, and their name for it is Minky, and everybody sort of knows it as that. Now, other companies have come out with it. They cannot use that phrase because it belongs to Benartex. The company that I buy the fabric from is Shannon Fabrics, and they call theirs Cuddle. They produce probably the most of any company out there, and basically that is about all they produce is the soft Minky type fabric, and then they also do a gauze fabric. They have so many different kinds. They have oodles of different colors, they have prints, they have some that's embossed, and I don't know if you know what that is, but embossed is they actually take the nap of the fabric and they kind of stamp it, and there's a design in it. Some, they have the little bumps on it, the bumpy Minky I call it. They have some that's fur, they have embossed fur, they have oodles and oodles of different types of this soft fabric. Now, everyone loves it, but I hear quite a bit that oh, I don't like sewing with it, it's a mess, I tried it once, I'll never do it again. But I promise you, if you learn to sew with it, and it makes a great backing for a quilt, it makes a great baby quilt, it's just beautiful, beautiful fabric, and I'm going to give you some tips today on how to work with it. So, one of the things, let's start with cutting. Now when you, sorry, I've got my notes here because I cannot remember all this. It has a nap. All this fabric has a nap, and let me lay it out here so you can see it. This is the red. Isn't it beautiful? And it's really, really, really soft. So if you brush it one way, it goes like a natural direction, and if you brush it the other way, it's the opposite. So you have to be careful with the nap. When you cut it out and you put it together, you want all those pieces running the same direction. Same thing if you use it as a back and you need to, maybe you have a large quilt and you need to cut it and seam the back, make sure that it's running, both pieces are running the same direction, because it's going to look really funny when you turn that quilt over and you've got one piece running one direction and one running the other. So I just recommend when you cut it, then that second piece after you've cut it, you're going to turn it so that they're both running the same direction. So just lay them down and just run your hand over it, and you can see it better under certain lights. See, there you can see how it's running the opposite way when it really ought to be this way. Okay. Now I got to tell you a funny story. I was vending one time at a show, and I had some kits that were made with this in my booth, and we had a sample made up, and two ladies came in and they were talking about it, and I heard they were over there petting it and whatnot, and I overheard the one lady lean over and tell her friend, she said, I just love this stuff. She said, I could just take my clothes off and roll in it. So I had to laugh. I thought that was funny. But everyone just loves this, and I promise if you make a quilt for your home, you're going to have everybody in your family fighting over who gets to cover up with it and use it. So when you cut with this, make sure that you have a new blade or a very sharp blade in your rotary cutter, and it will make a mess. Now, once you've cut it and you get done with all that, in order to stop that mess from, I don't know, let's see if I can kind of show you if you're not familiar with it. See, let me shake it out here so you can see the mess that it does make. Can you see all those little fibers fly? Now, it does not, Minky does not ravel, and it doesn't fray like cotton fabric. So once you've cut all, got your pieces cut, throw them in the dryer with a damp cloth and put it on very low heat for about 10 minutes, and that will stop the shedding. Then you can continue on and work with it. You can keep a little portable, one of those little portable vacuum cleaners handy when you work on it. You can use a lint roller to clean up your mess. And if you decide to cut it out and use it for pattern pieces other than just straight cutting, they recommend that you use weights on it instead of pins. Then it works a little bit better that way. And if you need to press it, please do not use a hot iron. You will regret that. This is polyester fabric. This is not cotton. It cannot handle the heat. If you use a really hot iron on it, you are going to melt the fibers, and then it's going to become hard, and you don't want to do that. But if you happen to get, say you had it folded up and you have a crease in it and you need to press that, use a pressing cloth and use it on pretty low heat. I'd really recommend just throwing it into a low heat dryer for a little bit with a damp cloth, and that'll take it out as well. All right, now when you go to sew with this, you're going to use a size 14 stretch needle. And when you, that's the other thing, if you pull it this way, it doesn't have a lot of stretch, but if you pull it this way, it does. So be very careful when you are sewing it that you usually try to sew it in the direction where it does not have the stretch. So it does not have much stretch going that direction. Okay, they also recommend to use flat flower head pins. Now, if you're not familiar, let's see if I have any of those handy. Of course I don't. They're just the pins that have the flowered ends on it, and they lay a little flatter than those with the like the little heads on them. Personally, I like Wonder Clips. I love the Wonder Clips. They work so well, and they're a little bit faster and easier to deal with. Also, when you pin, I recommend that so many people want a shortcut pinning in general. You must pin this. And I would suggest you pin at least every inch, a pin every inch, or a Wonder Clip or what have you. But you must, in order to be successful with this, you're going to have to take your time. This cannot be rushed, and use pins and or the Wonder Clips. Use a walking foot. If you do not have a walking foot for your machine, I would suggest you get one. Most of the walking feet, well, some of the machines are pretty pricey. I think the Berninas and the Vikings are pretty pricey with their walking feet, but I think most of the walking feet, if I remember right, they're around the $30 range, and it's well worth the investment for when you sew this and you feed it through your machine. Now, if you are incorporating this in a quilt top and you have regular cotton fabric that you're quilting or piecing with this, sew it with this on the bottom. Put the Minky on the bottom and keep your cotton on the top. They also recommend that, say you need to cut a 5.5 inch square, cut it 6 inches, cut it just a tad bit bigger, sew it using your cotton fabric piece as your guide, and then when you get that done, you can trim the excess of the Cuddle off. And the reason for it, it tends to curl on you. Now this hasn't, because this is for a back. We're putting this on the back of a quilt. But you can kind of see when you work on it, it will tend to curl for you. And that will help in that. Let's see, what else? The other thing that you may want to check your machine and make sure that you do not have a lot of tension on your presser foot. And most of the adjustments on your machine is usually right at the top of the machine over where your needle and presser foot is. If you do not know how to adjust that, get your manual out and look, and it should tell you. You don't want that too tight. You don't want to have a lot of tension on it because it's going to fight it pulling it through. Now, when you try to assemble your quilt, say you want to use this as your back and you're going to try to quilt this on your domestic sewing machine, basting spray. Use basting spray. Make sure that you're in a ventilated area And I would suggest some freezer paper or something on the outside edges because it'll catch the overspray so that you don't have a sticky mess on your hands. For batting, we use here, and this is one of the ones that they recommend. It is by Quilter's Dream, and it's called Dream Angel. It has a real light weight to it, and they also recommend Quilter's Dream, the Dream Puff. Now, I've had that puff here in the shop before. I like the Dream Angel much better. And then the Care. Now, this is the recommendations from Shannon Fabrics for theirs. I do not know. I'm thinking it's probably pretty generic across the board, but always be sure if you buy, say, Benner, Texas, Minky, and there's some other companies, other fabric companies that have this soft fabric out. That may be different, but I tend to think it's probably, the Care is probably the same. You want to wash it in cool water. You can tumble it dry without heat, like on your air cycle, or very, very, very low. And they tell you to do not use liquid fabric softener. And I can't answer that why. I don't know. I'm just kind of relaying that. So that is just the general information on the care and sewing and assembling of this. Now, if you would like to use this, say, for your binding, normally, and not everybody does this, but normally for our binding here at the shop, we cut 2.5-inch strips and piece those together, fold them in half, and we attach our binding. If you're going to use this for binding, cut 1 3/4-inch strips. And then, because this doesn't fray, you're gonna, if we put all ours on by machine, it's faster for us and it's much sturdier. But sew it on the back, flip it around to the front. You don't have to tuck it under. Just leave it just like this, and use a decorative stitch on your machine or a zigzag. And other than that, if there's no difference in attaching your binding, but just flip that over and then just use a nice little zigzag down, a little decorative stitch, and you're done. And it makes a great binding. And we're going to use it. I'm going to show you this quilt. This is our next one to quilt. This is our shop sample for this. It turned out really, really, really cute. And so we decided to put the Cuddle on the back, and then we're going to probably use that as well for the binding. And I'm going to hold this up here and just kind of show you, and I think it'll make a beautiful little baby blanket. Baby quilt, I shouldn't say baby blanket, a baby quilt. So if anyone has any questions about working with this, please feel free to stop by the shop. We're always here and happy to help. We want you to be successful with your projects. And now that we're carrying quite a bit of this, we do have a number of pieces in there. This is just a couple of them. We'll be getting more in over time, so just so that you're aware that we do carry it. And if you have any need assistance on how to work with it, feel free to ask. And with that, have a great week.